This is Live Booleans.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Live Booleans. My name's Costa and I'm joined by my co-host Alex.
Hey everyone.
Hello. This week we have Ashley from Wargaming Sydney. Ashley, thank you for coming on.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
So Ashley is a producer at Wargaming Sydney, and you've been at the company how long now?
Coming up to 2 years now. Feels like it's been forever though, so...
Yeah, that's good. And which games do you work on at Wargaming at the moment that you can talk about?
That I can talk about? None. So, yeah, at the moment working on a AAA game, so we're doing a co-dev with one of the studios in the UK, and that is a lot of fun, but yeah, in terms of that, still under wraps, but yeah, I've worked on some of the tech in Sydney before I transitioned over to the game section. So worked on the server tech that we built out here in Sydney, and then looking at how we can kind of market that to the wider wargaming teams to try and consume. So that's something I've been doing here as well.
Awesome.
So that's like building tools for use in house sort of things, or?
Yeah. So we have a lot of kind of tools and products that we build within our studio that we also, because wargaming's so big, right? Trying to find ways that we can build technology that's reusable by the rest of the company. So we've, as part of our studio, when they started out, they started building the core server tech that World of Tanks uses. And that's really how our studio started. So we still do quite a lot of that. We've got a lot of that expertise. So we drive a lot of the server tech. So like, cool, how do we make sure that your game doesn't crash when like 1 million people jump on it? And how do we keep it secure? So a lot of that kind of side of things. We've got a lot of experience. So we try and build products that we can ship out, and then looking at how we can set up tooling and things, like thinking the kind of future of our games. How can we make everything in-house so we don't need to purchase a bunch of third-party tools and stuff to manage our games?
Yeah, right. And I guess that would, get easier, but then you would need more as the teams get bigger. And
yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's kind of that catch-22. So we've been going through that in terms of looking at, right, we know where we want to take our tech division and how we want to grow that. Of course, that means like growing the teams and the products that we want to try and offer. And then again, on the game side, like we want to potentially drive our own game eventually. So how do we build those skills? We're building this big AAA game with our co-devs, so that requires a lot of our resources. So we've got a lot of people in the studio just focused on that. And then, yeah, if we get more and more of that game side of things into our studio, of course, again, more people. So space is always a fun thing to work out in the office.
So is it sort of split between development on this new AAA title and then just within the more technical platform for the game, or is it for just a technical platform that is distributed amongst the rest of the company as well, or to be used in other titles as well?
Yeah, that's more to be used by other studios and titles. Yep. So seeing how they can benefit from that tech that we're building out.
Awesome. They say a producer is someone who just gets shit done. Would you say that's your role? And what other duties do you have as a producer at Wargaming?
Yeah, it's definitely about getting shit done. There's a lot of kind of balancing. I think you go into the day knowing that you're not going to have the same day you had the day before, and anything can change kind of at a drop of a hat. So as that's part of the fun side of the role, is it's always new, there's always stuff happening, but at the same time it's really about juggling the different streams of work, the different people you work with. So you've got your artists, your designers, your engineers. How do they kind of mix? What issues do we need to help them resolve? And then there's also dealing with the stakeholders. So, of course, everything that we have to do here has to be translated back to the UK. Like, this is what we're doing, this is what we're working on. So that collaboration and communication is really key as well. So there's a lot of talking during the day.
So is you kind of the person that runs in between everyone and makes sure everything's going smoothly, unblock anything that needs to be unblocked, and just make sure stuff is getting done?
Yeah, exactly. Making sure everyone knows there's a plan, what's involved in the plan. Are we going to hit the plan? Do we need to create a new plan? And then it's also looking at things like, all right, we want to deliver a certain experience to the player. Is what we're doing matching that experience? Is it going to trigger what we want? Another piece of that is looking at, all right, we're working through play testing. What's the bugs? Is it fun? And I guess the concept of fun is a very, very big rabbit hole, but it's something you have to think about every day when you start working through all of the different things. So yeah, there's a lot that goes on, but makes it interesting.
Will you be on like one project at a time, or do you have to jump between and take one hat off and put another one on?
For myself, it was a little bit at the start when I moved from the tech side over to the game side. It was a little bit, I had to juggle the tech, so the team I was managing there and the roadmap and talking to kind of the wargaming stakeholders to like, all right, now I'm going to deal with the game side. I'm going to work on the specific element or stream, and I need to focus on that. And it was definitely two very different hats. So going from like, right, I'm trying to pitch things, sell it to stakeholders, and understand the deep technical reasons behind that, to like, all right, what is fun? How do we engage players? How do we sell this or market this? What's going to trigger certain emotions? Does this match the persona that we're trying to drive for? So a lot of kind of more high level thinking in terms of like emotions and experience, rather than like, right, this is what you're getting, this is super technical. So yeah, quite different.
That's almost definitely like harder than, I guess, switching projects. You're switching different areas of the brain, and
I was just gonna say that it's like both sides of your brain.
Yeah,
running at the same time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm lucky. So I'm completely on the game side, which is great. So I picked up 2 separate streams of work. So different areas that we're trying to focus on for the game. So I've been kind of championing that and working with the teams to make sure that we kind of get those experiences that we're after, which definitely makes my life a lot easier.
In terms of again, like a producer, what do you think it is that makes someone like an effective producer? You know, what is it that they need? What prerequisites does someone need to step into the shoes of being a producer?
So from my side, like I've done a lot of interviews with producers. We just had interns kind of apply for the role as well. A lot of what we look at, especially in the producer role, is like, can you think beyond what we've just given you? So like, there's a task you need to achieve. Can you show or demonstrate that you can kind of go that next step? Because things always kind of have flow-on effects, and so trying to just action that and think ahead is definitely a key thing. I think that's kind of what sets you apart, and having that curiosity is always, I think, one of the biggest things to help you succeed, because if you keep asking questions, you'll uncover certain areas that may not have been covered, and kind of just keep working towards that. So I think being able to do that really effectively is, for me, a really, really big thing to focus on. And then the other thing is you need to be able to multitask, or you need to be able to be like, right, this is my plan of attack, this is what I'm going to be doing, and then, like I said, you can quickly pivot if you need to, create a new plan. And I think a really big key to it is doing it in a way that's not going to like freak out the engineers or the artists when you do that, because of course, like, us as human beings, if we have a plan, we love it, we know what's coming up, you think like, all right, I'm telling you, you're moving to a new country tomorrow, you're going to freak out. So it's like, right, what's the plan? Why is the reason we're doing this? And trying to kind of like portray that, I think is really important. So like what's that style, that mannerism, that producers can have. I think you need to be as chill as you can be while still being able to manage as many things at the same time. So yeah, that's what I think would be really useful for producers.
So you're kind of relaxed on the outside, but really there's other things
screaming.
going. Yeah, there's internal
Inside,
screaming.
it's like this little hamster running on a wheel, going like, "Oh, what do I need to do?" Yeah.
So where did the those skills come from? Like, how did you personally pick those up? Was that within this role, or is it previous roles you found fit those?
Yeah, I think it's kind of just built up over time. I guess for me, I've always been a really relaxed person at heart anyway, so it takes a lot to stress me out. But I think, yeah, coming from how I kind of transitioned into the game side, I did a lot of work at an agency, so we dealt with a huge amount of customers. I had quite a lot going on at the same time, and so making sure that I can juggle and kind of keep calm was a really big important thing for me in that role. And so I think just being able to adapt to the situation and knowing that you can't always control what's going to happen, but it's really just what you make of it. And the big thing for me is my team. How are they going to feel? How are they going to react to things? So if I'm showing like I'm super stressed, I'm freaking out, that naturally is going to go over to them. So what's the best way of making sure they feel like they're being looked after? They know there's a plan. It's going to make them safe. They're not going to have to worry about certain things. And I think that to me is what I did learn at that agency. Like things are going to change. It's just knowing how do we communicate that? How do I work with my team? I worked at a bank before that. So when I first started out, like way back, I did engineering, so I was an engineer at the bank. As you can imagine, that was super thrilling. And also the reason I decided to move away from engineering, because it was so bland. And so I moved into kind of a production-y or product role over there, which was really fun. I really enjoyed the communication. And again, it was, I guess, learning how do I talk to people at certain levels because they're super formal, and then being able to talk to the engineers, balance that, be really calm in certain situations and kind of play it out as it needs to be. So yeah, it's just kind of accumulated through the years and made it a lot simpler for me.
You can definitely see, I mean, yourself coming from an engineering role and then you go into a product role, and then how your duties as a producer now are technical plus, communication and creative. It's like, yeah, there's almost the direct line from where you started to where you are now of how those responsibilities have actually accumulated over time. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And in terms of your role now, you talked about balancing technology, design, and sort of all these different things within your team. I know. I don't know if you've seen Apple's Mythic Quest show. Have you seen that?
Not yet. It's on my to watch. I feel like I game way too much to keep up with a lot of TV.
Yeah. It's an awesome TV show, and it's all around game development, and these big teams, and they're running an MMO game.
It feels like it's totally inaccurate though. It's a Hollywood pitch on it.
Yeah, right. It is a Hollywood one, and one of the key themes in that show is actually always around balancing technology and design, and it's always this plot thing where the producer in the middle is always under stress because you've got technology. The tech team in their ear saying, no, we need to implement this, we need to do that. And then you've got design, wanting to design it in a certain way. Then you've got, the monetization people always saying, no, we need to cut back on all the creative stuff, cut back on the technical stuff. We just need to make as much money as possible. So how much of that is, real, or how much of that is what you have to deal with on a day-to-day basis?
That sounds pretty accurate. So,
they got that right.
Yeah. No, they definitely got that right. There's a lot of that balancing. Like you're always going to have the different areas trying to convince you that their piece of work is really important and this is why we need to have it. I think the way that we've combated that and that we do really well in is we have cross-discipline teams, and that really helps quite a lot. So instead of it feeling like it's art or design telling engineering this is what it should be, they work together and they figure out like, all right, this is the impact we want. How do we get that? So we understand the limitations of the tech, we understand the vision from art and design, and then we can kind of bridge those. But needless to say, there's always conversations around like, hey, we want to be able to hit this or achieve this, and then we need to try and work towards, all right, well, how do we make everyone happy? Or unfortunately, how do we kind of choose a certain direction that might not please everyone else? But it's really just making sure they know, all right, this is the reason we're doing it, instead of it just being like, hey, this is what's happening. I think the kind of like injection of monetization and publishing and things are always really interesting. I work with the publishing team quite closely from the UK front, and they are fabulous. The friendliest people you will ever meet. They're great. And I think it's the way that we kind of always interact with them is just trying to see, all right, how, because we want players, right? We want the player experience. They're all about that data, the stats. How do we engage them? And so being able to interact on that level has been really useful, and just finding ways to make sure that helps influence or helps the team understand, like, oh, okay, cool, this is what we're trying to achieve. But yeah, definitely, there's a lot of different voices. It's just figuring out how to make them talk to each other or filter it in a way that's effective.
So is there like a map of, well, or if is there a framework of how the teams are structured there in terms of a certain amount of types of roles within the team, or like to ensure that it is that cross-disciplinary, or is it just depending on the requirements of the product? Or
it really depends on what stream of work we've got. So we've got quite a few, and depending on that, you create what the makeup of the team is. So I'm lucky that both the teams that I have, or the 3 teams I've got at the moment, they are all cross-functional, cross-discipline, which is fabulous. When we were on the tech side, we purely had tech, and that's also fine. It's just making sure that you have the team structured around what you're trying to achieve. So it's figuring out, all right, what's our vision? Where do we want to be? And then going, all right, what do we need to get there? And that way you kind of build your team from that.
And you spoke about those trade-offs that you have to do when making those decisions across a team like that. Is it yourself that makes trade-offs, or who gets involved? I mean, not specific names or anything, but the kind of roles that need to be involved to make those decisions. Who is it? Is it like people within the team as well, or is it a group decision?
Yeah, it depends on kind of what level that decision needs to happen. So if it's just something specific to like the work that we're trying to achieve within the group or our stream, and we're like, all right, this is the certain experience we want versus what maybe one of the engineers want, we definitely take that to like, all right, let's have a conversation so we can understand what both of the groups are trying to figure out, and then try and align, because you don't want any kind of line drawn between your team and have them be like, right, I'm engineering, this is my side, but they should have more influence. So depending on what the question or the kind of change is, that stream or that kind of discipline should have more say, but it should be everyone understanding it to be able to agree on it. There's not always going to be the case that people will agree. And at that point, it's really, all right, we all understand, but if someone is being stubborn, I will step in the production side and say, right, here's the risks, here's the mitigations. I feel like we all understand, and this is the direction we're going to go in. So if we can't get that call from the team, then that's where production just needs to step in, because it's going to start becoming overwhelming and kind of time consuming. I guess an interesting kind of lean on that is when you have to talk through certain things in terms of the bigger picture, so working with the higher level stakeholders in the UK for larger chunks or portions of the work, that's when it becomes interesting. So you have to really put together, right, this is what you're getting, this is the reason you're getting it, this is how it's going to impact the game, the costs involved, all of that. And it's much more of a, here's my very serious pitch and everything that we need to consider and the reason we need to consider it. And then at that point, that is out of our hands. They really need to drive, all right, is this what we want? And can we afford to build this? So yeah, really depends on the situation.
Mm-hmm.
Does it feel like with those decisions, there's a higher stakes pressure, given the size of Wargaming? Is it still that? Is there a higher pressure, or would it be the same amount of pressure if you were dealing with a indie title? Like obviously you've got bigger stakeholders and stuff, but okay, I guess the question is how do you compartmentalize that, like the pressures of those stakeholders as opposed to like an indie stakeholder?
How do you not stress out?
Yeah, how do you keep it together?
It's just one of those things, right? It's, that you have to talk to them, what your company stands for and what they expect, and so it's just making sure that, all right, I know this is for the good of the company, this is going to benefit us for kind of the greater good, we're not trying to sabotage them, and it's really putting trust in those stakeholders that, all right, they know what they want, what we can and can't do, and they will lead us kind of in that path that we should be following for the company. I guess the nice part about that is I haven't worked in indie, so I can't really reference it too much. But I mean, it's similar to like agency, right? You can give as much advice to your client as you want. At the end of the day, if they're like, no, I definitely will have the purple font on this app, you can't really do much about it. So yeah, it's a bit of a juggling act, but you kind of just need to make sure that you feel comfortable that they know what they're doing. Yeah.
And I guess when it comes to going home at the end of the day, especially in your role managing all these people, are you able to switch off? Do you end up taking it home mentally with you, or was that a learning process?
It's a bit of a learning process. So especially with our time zone differences, it's pretty hard to switch off at night because I have calls at night. So it's like, right, do your day-to-day, deal with the teams in Sydney, make sure that everything is running smoothly, we're doing what we need to, and then it's like, all right, have a few hours, kind of have dinner, spend time with the family, and then it's like, right, switch your mindset back into meeting mode, let's talk through all of the stuff with the UK. I think it's just how you manage it. We have definitely set some bounds, so I've said that, hey, like Friday nights are no-go zones, like I'm not doing Friday night calls, that's footy night, I watch the league, you can't interrupt that. And then it's just kind of like setting those no meeting nights to be like, right, if you want me, you can get me on these days, these kind of timelines, and then you can take it from there. So I think it's good. It's what you make of it, right? And I definitely have found my way of coping is playing games when I have time in between meetings. So that definitely helps me just calm and chill out. And then even in evenings, me and my partner, he is a huge gaming fan as well, so we both just sit there, play some games, and it's just kind of a nice vent, which is great.
In that in itself, is it hard to switch off when you're playing a game and not go, oh, that's a good idea for this thing or something like that?
It's always good, right? It's research, so
yeah.
Just seeing what other people are doing, making sure that, you might see something, you're like, oh, this is a really interesting way that they did this game mechanic. Nothing is new. Everything is kind of inspired by something. So I think being able to see what's out there and think about like, oh, this is a way we can do it better is always great.
What games are you playing at the moment?
So I have gotten back into Doom. So nice. The new Doom, and then we have just got our VR set back. So we moved from New Zealand and we got a bunch of stuff shipped over. So we got our VR, so we're starting to play a bit of Resident Evil before the new one comes out. So yeah, it's playing a bit of that. It's not very calming. actually.
Yeah, those games seem very high energy, stress inducing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then a lot of Animal Crossing. So the
Yeah.
complete opposite. That was like my go-to during the lockdown that we had last year as well. And even this morning, I decided like after a few weeks of not playing it, I'll jump back in and. There's a lot of weeding. I'm not gonna
Yeah.
lie.
Yeah.
And then I was like, why am I doing this? I don't even weed at home. But no, it's that. So that's nice and calm.
Yeah.
And then Tetris, the new Tetris. If you haven't played it,
I haven't played it. No.
so good. Frustrating because I suck at Tetris.
Yeah.
But it's really cool the way they did it with the music and the visuals. It feels like you're at some like techno concert.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
fantastic.
I've just done like a psychology analysis on you, and I'm like, okay, you got Tetris, that's the logic part of your job. You've got Doom and Resident Evil, that's the stress, high intensity. Then Animal Crossing is, I'm guessing, like resource time management stuff.
Nice. Yeah, that sounds like a really good breakdown.
Yeah.
It's interesting you say Animal Crossing. I actually saw an article recently. There was a study that went on, and it was basically saying that during COVID lockdown, Animal Crossing was was played by a lot of people, and it was a way of actually reducing, anxiety and stress and that sort of stuff throughout COVID, which was just interesting. And everyone I speak to, and then when I play the game, I feel like it's just so stressful because it's like you're dealing with all this stuff that it feels like you're living a second life. That it's quite stressful.
Different in March. Last March, it was like everyone was in the house, so you had the wind going. You're like, I'm there right now.
Yeah. And I saw Wargaming Sydney. I don't know if this is still going on, but I came across an article around extending the work from home policy or setup until June this year. Is that still going on at Wargaming?
Yeah, it's still happening. So, the studio is fantastic. As part of like a lot of the influx side of things with COVID, it's just really hard for them to predict, like, all right, when's it going to calm down? How do we create that stable environment for the teams as well? Because a lot of us were like, all right, cool, we're going to come back next week, and then there'd be another cluster that breaks out and it's back into lockdown. And so, early on, they were like, all right, so we don't want to cause this for our employees. We want to make sure that everyone kind of feels confident and safe. And in doing so, we're going to say, right, until June next year, everyone can work from home. They help everyone set up, which is amazing. So, like, we got to take our computers home, our seats, they provided us screens, everything we needed to just set up. And it made such a huge difference. Like, everyone, I think for us, the transition initially, it felt weird because you don't have that studio dynamic, but having the setup just made it so much easier. We already had certain tools. They were really flexible. So like Miro we started using, which is an online tool to collaborate. And that worked really well for a lot of teams. It's kind of like a virtual whiteboard, heaps of sticky notes because, we love sticky notes here. Probably a lot of trees saved during the year. But yeah, so it's just a great kind of example of how they brought everyone licenses for that so we can use that. But yeah, they were really awesome about it, and we're starting to talk about what does kind of coming back to the office look like. So potentially hybrid. So, 1 or 2 days every fortnight, we come in as a team, we make the most of that time here, and then we can kind of go back home, sit back in. We hired a lot of people during the lockdown or the COVID period, so much so that we need another kind of office space because so many people got hired. So no, it's really good. It's great for peace of mind, and I think it's definitely helped us kind of in the right direction.
Did it have a big impact on production side of things in terms of, obviously that initial, the initial figuring out how to do it and all that sort of stuff, but did it really have a big impact on production?
Definitely.
Yeah.
A lot of my life before COVID was like walking up to the engineer or the designer, tapping on their shoulder and being like, "Hey, how's this going? Where are we at? What are things we need to worry about?" Doing that remotely, you can't just tap someone on the shoulder. So your equivalent's like, "Hey, can we book a meeting so that we can talk about this thing?" And then it also feels like super formal as well. So that was definitely the hardest. It's like those informal chats you didn't know were so valuable and important actually was, and it's like, all right, well now I have a day that starts at like 8, finishes at 5, and I've just got back-to-back meetings. So that was where we had to really try and adjust and be like, all right, how do we find a better way of doing this? And we worked through a bunch of stuff in different teams in terms of how to do that. So that's good now. But yeah, initially to me, it was like, oh, okay, where do we go? What do we do? I don't like silence. Why is no one talking?
I guess a company with the size of Wargaming, because this is experimental, I guess, for everyone, but a lot of people will be looking to you guys, like, how did you handle this? And then wanting to hear your results and what we can do in the future and stuff like that.
Yeah. So from our side, I think, like I said, Miro is probably a huge savior. We have so many meetings where we draw stuff on the whiteboards, or we kind of use sticky notes to talk through things and do like little workshops. And so not having the ability initially to do that was really hard. So we found also it's a great tool when you're in a meeting, knowing people are like participating, they're listening, they're taking knowledge of what's happening, because before you jump in a call, like you have your screens, you're definitely going to multitask. I know I do this all the time where I'm like in a call and then I'm like, oh yeah, that's really interesting, start typing on the side. So it's trying to find a way to pull them in. So using Miro was really, really a good tool for us. And then the other part was we experimented with like having an open Discord chat. So everyone in the team jumps in Discord, and then it's like you can have that moment of like, oh, hey, are you still there? Let's quickly have a chat, go to a side room. When you have a room full of engineers, you do not get a lot of chatter. So all you would have is like me leaving my mic open with my like hip hop music on the side, and then it's dead. So that didn't work. So we're like, all right, let's not do this. This is awkward. And then so we figured out that Slack is just the easiest. So what we actually did, which felt excessive when we started, but actually has been a saving grace, is for each like piece of work or feature that we were working on, we created a new Slack channel, and then any kind of chatter around that we used, and that was really easy because then we can keep updates, and I can be like, oh cool, this is where they're at, we can post the images and stuff. So that was really handy. And then just being super interactive on Slack, like just posting GIFs and things. So like one icebreaker was like, hey, every week we have a 15-minute icebreaker of like, all right, we're going to do a GIF war. So like we have to choose what GIFs we want, and then we battle it out and see who's like the GIF master. And it's just like finding those little fun, quirky things to make sure the team's still happy, they're still together. We did like a lot of mid-week pub quizzes. So we'd have like pub quiz, some virtual like mini games just to keep it fun. That definitely helped us. I think other than that, it was just making sure people keep their videos on when we had calls, because we felt initially like no one would talk and no one had the camera on, so at least being able to see people helped a lot. But I think from where we started to now, just those small little changes made such a big difference.
Yeah. What was because you mentioned using Discord and then going to Slack, because that is something that has been coming up a lot with teams and co-working spaces, is they have a trouble with one, so they're going to the other. So I'm sure you were saying it. What made you guys go to Slack as opposed to Discord?
So we always had Slack, but I guess the reason we wanted to do Discord is we were trying to emulate those kind of natural interactions, like, oh, hey, by the way, Alex, like I wanted to chat to you about this thing. You're already here. Let's quickly have a bit of a conversation about it. But it just never happened. Like we would just sit there awkwardly, and no one would talk, or someone would be like, oh, how's it doing? How's it going? And no one's at their desk, and you're like, okay, I'll just mute myself again. So that didn't really work. I think these Slack channels just helped give them a specific use for that channel, and then that made it a little bit easier. But yeah, we even tried. I can't remember what it was called, but it's this tool where like it's super fun. It's like you're playing a game, and you're in a 2D platformer style game. You can go into like rooms. You have little computers set up, so it's like interactive spatial audio and cameras, and super fancy. And I was like, this is great. This is like a virtual office, 2D pixel art. Like, what more do you want? And we used it like one day, and that was it. So I was like, all right, let's just go to basics. Like, what do we want to talk about? I think the other part that I didn't mention, but now thinking about it is really useful, is like before we start our calls, we usually have like a few minutes where we just have a chat. Like we just try and do our catch up. So you would talk about something that you were doing, or having those informal conversations before you kick into meeting mode. That's been really, really great. So that's kind of been making up for kind of not having some of those social interactions.
Yeah, nice.
It's always interesting hearing how people approach the different ways of socializing online, because it's just such it is what we live with now, having to do that. So yeah, always quite interesting. I guess what does it look like now? I know you mentioned this sort of work from home policies being considered of having people come in 1 or 2 days a fortnight or a week. What do you feel like the balance is? Well, what do you feel comfortable with in terms of producing and being in that role of a producer remotely, and how do you think that will look like in the future?
Yeah, I think with the setup, I think hybrid's definitely a good way to go about it. So something, even though I found it really challenging at the start going full remote, I've gotten into a really good habit in terms of like, all right, I have a really good work-life balance because I have to do evening calls. I don't need to worry about traveling 2 hours of the day. So that's automatically just time I get at home to myself. And so even when I'm at home, I feel like I can just zone out, do a lot of my production planning, do a lot of kind of that admin stuff that when you're in the office, you don't have such a huge time to do, because you get distracted by like running around, chatting to people, having those conversations. You never have time to just sit down and kind of zone out and just do what you need to do. So I think for production moving forward, I feel like a lot of companies will start to find that remote production people are just going to be really good. It's like the same as the production teams as well, and the engineering groups. I think it's just how you kind of manage yourself. But yeah, it's been really great being able to have that opportunity to kind of learn through, all right, what works, what doesn't work. Like I said, the start of like, all right, we have no way of knowing how to interact with the team and get the info that we want. Now we're in such a good rhythm. It's just super easy to Slack someone, they respond to you, you know what you need to do, you can kind of just get what you need. So I think moving forward, hybrid, definitely the way to go.
Do you feel more focused now working in a remote setting?
I definitely feel more focused. I think it just kind of removes some of the things, and I think I'm one of those people that will always distract myself if I can to chat with people. So like at home, it's just me and my dog. So, I mean, there's only so much I can talk to my dog about. And then I'm like, all right, now back to like normal people and focusing. So I don't know. I know a lot of people say they get distracted at home, but for me, it's the opposite. I find it's a great time just to hone in and be like, right, I know I need to get this done. I'm gonna do it. Um, so it works out really well. I think at work, I love it because there's just so many people around that you can chat to that you don't get to talk to normally. And so I think that's why I want hybrid as well, because you can actually have those engagements, and naturally it has some of those flow on effects like, oh, there's this thing happening in another team. It's really relevant to maybe what we're doing. So I think that on its own has some really good merit for the studio atmosphere that we have. So it's really how are we going to set up the space and the environment in the studio moving forward. So it's going to be an interesting transition, I think.
Does Wargaming Sydney employ people remotely as well at the moment, or is it just is that something that's open to it now? Is that because of COVID, or was that previously already a thing?
So before COVID, it was a thing. It wasn't as big of a thing because we would just relocate people to Sydney. We ended up hiring, I think it's about 40 plus people during COVID, which was massive. So it's 40 faces I've never seen in the studio. But it was great because it just shows the flexibility that I think the whole industry has. Instead of needing people on site, being able to get the experience you want in different places. It's been really, really handy. And then it also helps because everyone's remote, so they don't feel like they're missing out too much, and we can still kind of build that strong relationships with the team members.
You've played around with virtual reality. Do you think that will play a part in?
I was literally going to think that.
In facilitating some of this social stuff in the future or work. I mean, I love it. I got an Oculus Quest 2, and
Nice.
there's some there's a venues game or venues app where it's basically just online social events, and you get to speak to other people. Mind you, there's a lot of trolling and that sort of stuff, but there is the basis and the concept is there. Do you feel like that's something that would be interesting?
Potentially. It's one of those things, like if someone builds it, surely someone will use it. I guess it'll be interesting to see. The tech isn't quite where it needs to be yet to be able to support it, and it's not super accessible. So maybe quite far down the track that might just be normal, and people are like, oh my gosh, you went and saw people in real life. Like, who does that?
Yeah.
But I think right now, at least the near future, probably not. Plus, I love VR, but I get super seasick. So, whenever as you have to take heaps of breaks, and then you got the sweaty forehead thing going.
Yeah.
And, no.
That's probably what happens when you play Resident Evil or Doom or something. The stress,
I think probably I always thought if I had money in stocks or something like that, I was always going to go the route of AR, and I reckon that would, for something like this where you can still interact with the real world, and how Facebook talk about virtual meetings of you can see the person there if you wear the headset, and it's all based on how how comfortable I guess the tech is. 3D movies and films is a good idea in theory, and then just no one wants to wear the glasses, so we just don't see that anymore. Everyone's got expensive TVs that don't do anything, and so I think if it was an AR hybrid, that might be a bit more accessible.
I was thinking something along the lines of Star Wars. We've got the holographic image of someone popping up, and it's semi-real, semi-not, and you're you can see them talk, interact. That's all cool. I think that'll be fun.
Yeah,
everyone sits in a circle like the Jedi Council.
Exactly.
There's a company out here in Adelaide who are been developing that. Costa and I know them. Voxon.
Oh, Voxon,
yeah. They've been at it for ages,
awesome.
But they've got that holographic. I think it's set up at an arcade in Japan, but they're big Star Wars fans. All their promo material has those kinds of things. So Voxon, get on it. Yeah, I guess one thing we always ask is for the person we're talking to, the role relevant to them. What would you say to the the next one coming up? Like, what have you learned? What's your advice to like someone who wants to become a producer in a studio that, you know, might be an indie team, might be working towards a AAA title like yourself? What kind of advice would you like to give?
So I think the main one that I've always come back to is no matter kind of like what area you're in or what you're trying to do, create an environment that's supporting for your team, because that's always going to help you succeed. And I think big no-no if you go into a meeting slamming your team that you worked with. It's a big problem. But I think for me, really knowing how you can support them, give them what they need, because ultimately they're building what you're after and trying to get that experience. And then also having that culture of, you know, not being risk averse, like supporting taking risks, failing, and not kind of creating a culture of blame. I think in the past I've seen a lot of that, and it's hindering, right? Because that is going to stop you from being innovative. It's going to stop people from feeling creative, because they're always going to worry, if I fail, there's this repercussion, or I'm not going to be able to do it ever again, or I'm going to get slapped on the wrist. And so for me, it's, you know, don't be afraid of taking risks. Don't be afraid of stepping outside your comfort zone and trying to be vulnerable in order to try and make something succeed, or try and do it differently for a good reason.
And I guess a lot of taking risks, it would help to having the like outside voices. Like if things become an echo chamber, you're, I guess, maybe less likely to take those risks.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think it's always hard feeling confident to take risk, because there's always that chance you're going to fail. But I think if you can cultivate that culture within your team, at least, and making them feel reassured. So something that I love that we started doing in our teams was celebrating our failures. So we had failure of the week, or like if someone made a fault, or they made a bug, or they caused some silly mistake, or even a big mistake, they would post it and they'll be like, fail of the week, put it down, and then they'd say, this is what I've learned from it. And I think it's great, because you see that, you know, they're proud that they failed, they know what caused it, and they know kind of not to do in the future, but kind of there's a lot of key learnings that you can take from it, and not even from like I know if I do this, this is what's going to happen. But I think from a personality point of view, and having the team and people around you know that you can be vulnerable enough and trusting enough to fail, I think is a really big thing.
Yeah. That's good, and that's awesome. Unique. That's like a what do I call it? A post-mortem, like when a project's done, but you're doing it live.
Yeah, exactly.
And especially in a workforce like culture, I guess, where people are so used to doing things on their own, like these kind of projects, they don't want to admit their faults so readily.
Yeah.
So being accepting of that, that's great. I think that's something we can all take.
People are always super scared to admit that they've done something wrong, and I think, yeah, it's great that Wargaming has that sort of culture of making failure something that you're comfortable with, and embracing it and sharing it, and making it not so scary. So that's awesome. Awesome. How can people reach out to you or find you on social media or the internet?
The internet. Yeah, no, I think so. The easiest way is probably LinkedIn. So you can just search my really long name and you will find me. I have Instagram, but I don't really use it. And I have Twitter, which I only joined a few months ago, because I follow a lot of competitive gaming for COD, but I don't tweet a lot. So you can find me that way, but LinkedIn's probably the best.
Awesome.
Cool.
Awesome. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thanks. It's been awesome talking to you,
awesome.
Ashley.
Yeah, it was a great afternoon. Thank you so much.
Thanks for tuning in.